guys, Michelle here at East Ave Art. Today I'm going to show you a painting I did to hang up in my home, and I'm going to go over the process for painting this bright lemon painting, as well as updating the color on my frame that I hung it in to complement my new painting. Feel free to paint along with me, and let's go ahead and get started. To start this painting, I did a really light sketch on my watercolor paper. If you've seen any of my videos before, you know that I usually favor drawing on something else first and then transferring that sketch to my actual watercolor paper. But for this painting, I just drew my sketch out because I really just needed the dimensions, and I just drew it directly onto the watercolor paper because lemons and leaves are pretty easy shapes to make. So I start by mixing up a solid yellow that's really, really bright. And I also will mix up a secondary shadow yellow, which I'll achieve by adding in some ochre and a bit of purple. If you've seen some of my recent paintings, I talked about using complementary colors to create a nice natural looking shadow. So in this case, purple sits opposite yellow on the color wheel, and that's how you know that it's complementary. And that's why I like to mix up a touch of purple into my yellows. I'll also mix up a couple different greens, and once I've done that, I'm ready to hit the page. So I'm going to use my light sketch as a guide, and I'm just going to fill in where I've drawn out the lemon here. And you'll see that I'll have kind of a 3-step process. I'm going to fill my lemon with yellow paint, but I also like to make it varied. In some areas, the yellow is like a little bit thicker. In other areas, I'll kind of pull up some of the paint to give it sort of a lighter section. And I'll also leave a bit of white space to show where the highlight's hitting. The next thing I'll do is I will put a little bit of my shadow color on one side of the lemon, and that gives the effect of, you know, the light isn't hitting in that area, so there would naturally be a shadow there. And I think taken together, these 3 strategies, you know, having a little bit of white space, having a shadow, and even the parts that are just pure yellow aren't really exactly the same uniform yellow. That creates the appearance to me of a 3D shape because my lemons aren't just this like flat uniform 2D lemon. And I like that kind of variety. I think it gives a little bit of realism and visual interest when I'm looking at my final product. So I'm going to follow the same approach with, you know, these 3 steps for the first wash of the lemon. So I'm going to do kind of a first, I don't want to say a first draft, but sort of a first draft. This will be my first wash, and I'm going to go through all of the lemons in the same way. And so while I'm painting this, I'll just give you some backstory. I work from home. Currently, I'm working in the IT industry. I'm something called a proposal writer. And I also teach one freshman English composition course part-time at a local community college. I was actually a community college professor for about 12 years full-time before I transitioned into the career that I'm currently in a couple years ago. And I just felt like I was ready for a change, and this new career has also allowed me to work from home, and which has been great because it's given me the opportunity to move back to my hometown. So overall, I'm pretty busy having a full-time job and a part-time job, but I am trying to make more time for my art and just sharing my art on these various platforms. YouTube is kind of an interesting platform for me because I was a teacher. I wasn't an art teacher. But it is kind of fun to kind of explain how I go about creating some of these pieces of art. And personally, I found as an English teacher that when I was teaching writing, it actually helped me to become a stronger writer. So I'm hoping that by kind of creating these tutorials on YouTube will help me to become a stronger painter. So I think anytime you're having to teach something, you're really having to reflect on it. And reflection is always a wonderful opportunity to improve. So anyway, all of that aside, I'm painting this particular piece because I'm trying to spruce up my home office. I spend a ton of time in my home office because I work from home, and it's also where I paint. I kind of have two desks that are next to each other. And I'm trying to keep this room as cheerful and cozy as possible. So I thought, something a little bit brighter would add a lot of value to my workspace. So that's probably enough about me. I'll just let you finish watching the rest of these lemons filling up the page. Okay, so I have my first layer of all of my lemons, and I'm going to add in some branches and leaves. I like using a couple different shades of green for the leaves. I think it makes it look pretty and somewhat natural, to leave, again, a little bit of white space. And also just to kind of put the lighter shade down first and then drop in a little bit of the darker shade while it's still wet, and just kind of let the watercolor do what it does. Once all of my lemons dried, I actually spent some time going over them with another layer of paint. So I kind of, in some areas where I wanted to brighten up the color, I added my bright yellow, again, that pure yellow, and then also spent some time dropping in some more shadow. I just think that the extra layer of paint added a little bit of texture and depth. But this process of, like, once something's dry and you go over it again with another layer is referred to as wet into dry. And I made sure that I also sort of added shadows under where I put the leaves, so the viewer can kind of see that the shadows are cast by the leaves. And again, that's just something that is a preference, but I like to have a blend of realism into my illustrations. And then I just kind of spent some time touching up the lemons with the base yellow and the shadow yellow. As I kind of saw fit, I just sort of went over them based on what kind of my preference was. Okay, now here's the final version of my painting. You can stop here. I wanted to put this in one of my 5x7 frames and hang it up like I mentioned earlier. I wasn't really happy with the frame color. The black felt a little bit drab, so I pulled out my acrylics to paint this frame. And I wiped down my frame first just with a damp cloth to make sure there wasn't any dust or debris on it. And then I used some gesso. You saw me show that to the camera a second ago. And gesso just prepares surfaces for your acrylic paint. So it's going to help the acrylic adhere to the surface. And I actually put 2 coats of gesso on this frame because it was black. It did need a couple of coats of that white to cover it up, but also, you know, I think it's a good preparation for the acrylic. Okay, so here you can see what the 2 coats of gesso looked like. And I mixed up some yellow, white, and blue in my acrylics until I got this kind of sea foam green that you see me painting onto my frame. And I thought it would look really nice with the yellow and the green in my lemon painting. So I ended up putting a couple of layers of this paint color onto my frame, and then once I let it dry, I reframed it, and here you can see the final product. I have a great new bright cheerful painting for my home office. Thanks so much for watching, and please hit the like and subscribe button for more art content from me.